Ali Gray, having come all the way from deepest Gloucestershire, Herefordshire, to talk to us. Ali is a consultant psychiatrist, a senior consultant psychiatrist at a young age, she says, which is a sign of the way things are going at the moment. And she's also an Anglican priest. So she's worked in mental health for 30 years, and she has, I think, increasingly seen her colleagues struggling and is wondering what is happening in the NHS. Is this, and I think when I was talking to her just now, she was sort of feeling the spirit of the NHS or something about it is actually sort of dying somehow. Let's talk about that. So that's the sort of reason that Ali's got good news to tell us, and so I'll hand over to you to
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, why did I get interested in compassion and in what goes wrong within the NHS? Well, it's because I've been there and done that. So, 30 years ago, I was that house officer. On the Sunday night of a shift that started on Friday 9 AM, didn't finish till Monday 5 PM with no guaranteed time off or sleep, and I had no sleep. I'd not even got to bed on the Sunday night at 3 AM. I probably had a couple of hours lying down on the Saturday, absolutely rigid, totally waiting for the crash bleed to go. And not surprisingly, somewhere on the Sunday evening, I was getting to my limit. And I can still remember it. The nurse turning to me as I was about to leave, having clerked in the last patient, and said, "Oh, don't go, Dr Gray, we've got a stroke coming in." And right at that moment, I wanted that person to die, so I could get some sleep. I'd absolutely hit the wall, run out of any compassion and empathy whatsoever. I couldn't have carried on right at that moment. Burst into tears. Nice nurses mopped me up, made me a cup of tea, did one or two very practical things that took the pressure off, and I was able to pull it together and keep going till the Monday morning when my registrar took one look at me and sent me home to bed. I was, utterly exhausted. And then working the Tuesday, and the Wednesday, and the Wednesday night. It's like hitting the wall in the marathon. You know, you can only run so far before you lose your immediate energy, your glycogen stores run out, and you can only then keep going on sheer guts and determination. But you can do quite a lot to build yourself up to prepare for the marathon. You can actually improve things so that your wall is put back and put back. I don't think it ever quite gets so that people can run the marathon easily, but certainly it can be better. So how do I keep my wall at bay? Well, one of the things personally is I work 3 days a week in the NHS. If I worked full time at the moment, I wouldn't still be there. Simply wouldn't. I do spend the other days doing useful things, but the flexibility that the church work gives me enables me then to have the resources to do the long days and the extra time that the NHS work demands. We all have different levels of internal resources, and I guess anyone that was utterly lacking in compassion would not be working in healthcare. One would hope. Maybe they would very rapidly become a chief executive. Let's take a step back. What do we mean by compassion? Dalai Lama calls it a sensitivity to the suffering of self and others, with a deep commitment to try and prevent it. Self-compassion, really important. In the Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, God is seen as the compassionate and merciful. And so those of us that are faith people can derive strength and direction from our relationship with God. Putting it in scientific terms, compassion itself hasn't really been studied very much, but empathy has. And the way it fits together is that empathy is the drive to understand the other person, the ability to understand their emotion, and the cognitive ability to sort of get inside what they're feeling. And then, so that's empathy, that's one chunk, and compassion adds the motivation to do something about it. So there's a cognitive aspect, there's an emotional aspect, and there's a volitional aspect. And that all comes together. Compassion then leads to altruistic activity. Other researchers add in a sort of aspect of empathy which is about self-regulation, about knowing whose distress it is anyway, and about being able to separate out your distress from their distress. Empathy develops in the first few months of childhood when you have regular, compassionate caregivers. You develop normal empathy. And of course we know that some people don't have that experience and don't develop normal empathy. And interestingly, psychopaths are extremely good at the cognitive aspects of empathy. They know exactly how distressed you are and what's made you distressed from a couple of minutes conversation. But they lack the emotional aspect that would then mean that they were likely to behave in a way that relieved your distress rather than taking advantage of you. And on the other hand, people who have autism have very high levels of emotional empathy. They feel what other people feel to a very strong degree, but they lack the cognitive side that makes sense of what they're feeling and puts it all together. So, developing compassion. There's a really good book from Karen Armstrong, 12 Steps of Compassion. And that's really gives the what is really the Buddhist route to developing compassion. So concentrating and thinking and feeling compassion for those that you're close to and for yourself. And then gradually imagining and feeling compassion and spreading it out to those that you don't know so well. And over time learning to find compassion for those you find difficult. So, we know the NHS is struggling. It's been all over the newspapers, and as somebody that's regularly on the shop floor and in A&E, yes, it is like a war zone. It is horrid to work where I work at the moment. Very uncomfortable, very distressing, very high levels of distress amongst the staff, very high sickness levels. The system is right on the edge of breaking. But within the current resources, we still have individual choices. It doesn't take 30 seconds to introduce yourself to the patient. Or as I have to do, introduce myself every 5 minutes to the patient because they've mostly got Alzheimer's and they forget who they're talking to or what it's about if they get it all distracted. It doesn't take long to establish that basic rapport. I feel very ambivalent about the Hello, My Name Is campaign. I'm really glad that that's out there and that somebody's doing it, but I'm so sad that it felt necessary to do it. But actually we have to tell young doctors and nurses that they need to introduce themselves. That we've lost that understanding of what it's like to be a patient. That we could imagine it was okay come up to somebody and start taking blood off them without explaining who we are and why. So what can we do? Well, we can do very simple things. We can choose to take our breaks and take them regularly. Yes, sometimes it's hard to get off the ward. Sometimes it's hard to stop the clinic for 10 minutes. But I know for myself, I work so much better afterwards than before. We can try to support our colleagues to get their breaks. And we can take the 30 seconds that it takes to say, good job, well done. Just recently, I've been helping work with somebody who was very, very disruptive, 93-year-old with Parkinson's dementia, who was making it really hard for the staff on the ward because he'd be charming in the mornings and then suddenly in the late afternoon he'd flip out and become physically violent and aggressive. And the staff dealt with this day after day with very slow increments of change that we were able to put in. So putting extra staff in didn't really do it, and giving him extra medication didn't really do it, until finally he went to a mental health-based unit that could better deal with his degree of aggression. And yet when I got on the ward the next day and talked to the nurses who'd been thumped, they were able to say, actually I miss him. Because he was so lovely in the mornings, I was able to see the real person, and I was able to forgive him for thumping later on in the day. And actually I miss him. And I was so heartened by that, that even in the middle of that horrible experience, they could still find compassion, and still find love for that bloke who thumped him. I don't want to be heard to be saying, right, it's all up to you guys, find some more compassion and get on with it. There are systemic things that are very, very wrong, and they need addressing. The lack of staff, the lack of facilities, but we have choices. We have choices. The NHS has been in crisis on and off ever since it was formed. I found a lovely quote from Bevan in 1952, actually at an RCN conference. "We shall never have all we need," he said. "Expectations will always exceed capacity. The service must always be changing, growing and improving. It must always appear inadequate." That was 1952. And my other quote of the week came from a doctor talking about the way we dehumanise patients in order to cope. "The most common criticism made at present by older practitioners is that young graduates have been taught a great deal about the mechanism of disease, but very little about the practice of medicine. To put it more bluntly, they're too scientific and they don't know how to take care of patients." When was that? 1927. It has always been so to a large degree. Don't panic. I love the NHS. I love the fact that we can get treatment. I love the fact that we don't have to panic when one of our family members is ill. Have you heard about the remake of Breaking Bad, the English version? Breaking Bad, American chemistry teacher, diagnosed with a serious cancer. He decides to make drugs in order to fund his treatment and make sure there's some money for his family. British version, 1 episode. Gets ill, goes to his GP, sees the NHS, gets cured. We need to rejoice in what we've got. We need to make the change. Think back for a minute to when you first started. When you got that letter, email, phone call saying you'd got into the training course. Back to when it was shiny shoes and enthusiasm. Can you remember what it was like? What brought you into healthcare in the first place? Can you tap back into that feeling? The joy of being allowed into somebody's life so deeply, so immediately. The fact that you can make such a difference so quickly. Can you find that again? There's lots that need to change, but there are many things that we can do, that we have within reach. Let's do it.
Thank you.